Hello, I'm Adrian and welcome to another Nice Lick Let's Learn It, the series where I show you one of my nice licks and then we learn it together. And in a slight change to the usual format, today I'm going to be showing you somebody else's nice lick and then we're going to learn it together. I thought it might be interesting to occasionally open this series up to other people's riffs and licks, and if you've got any suggestions do let me know. It just has to be short and interesting and above all nice. So today I'm looking at the incredible opening riff or lick from Memphis Soul Stew by King Curtis. A bit more about that in just a moment, but first let's take a listen to the lick. Oh yes, very nice. So you may have seen a recent video I did where I looked at how to use sixths in a kind of bluesy soul style, and sixths are these little two-note shapes that sound a bit like that. To me they sound really kind of R&B and soul, but you can use them in all kinds of different styles of music. And that put me in mind of this particular lick, which is one of the best examples I can think of this particular sound. So Memphis Soul Stew is a 1967 track from King Curtis, who was a sax player. And it's an incredible funky soul kind of a track. The rhythm section is brilliant. You've got Bernard Purdie on drums. Not sure who the bass player is, but he's amazing too. And guitar is played by the great Cornell Dupree, and he's primarily known, I think, as a session player. Played on all kinds of great soul and R&B records, a lot of the famous Aretha Franklin records. Long been a favourite player of mine. Anyway, let's take a look at this lick. So Memphis Soul Stew, or the first part of Memphis Soul Stew, is all based on a one chord vamp. That just means that the band is kind of hanging around a single chord. In this case it's an E7 kind of a sound, and the band is outlining that sound. Now what Cornell Dupree is doing over the top of that is he's playing these sixths which describe that E7 kind of a sound. And in the previous video I did on sixths I talked a little bit about the theory behind this, and sixths is just the name for, it's a musical interval, and it's the fact that these pairs of notes are 6 scale steps apart in the musical alphabet, and the notes can be seen as coming from the E Mixolydian mode. The Mixolydian mode is a scale which describes the sound of a 7th chord, and the notes that we've got are just E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp and D. So it's a major scale with a flattened 7th, and that's what allows it to fit the sound of that E7 chord. And there was actually a little bit of confusion when I did this previous video on the theory of six, and there's no two ways about it. It can be a little bit confusing. I think you just have to remember that these shapes are called sixths just because they're 6 scale steps apart, or 6 letters apart in the musical alphabet. That's just a fixed distance. That's the interval between the notes. I think people were getting confused when you start talking about sixths as being inverted thirds, or when you start thinking about these shapes and how they relate to the key. So what function these notes are playing in the key or in the chord that you're playing over at a given moment. And it is pretty confusing, but I think you need to remember that it's nice to know all of this theory stuff, but don't get too hung up about it. This is about music above all else, and the chances that Cornell Dupree or any of these other players who use this sound were thinking in theoretical terms when they were playing these guitar parts is very, very unlikely. I don't think Cornell Dupree was thinking, okay, I'm going to compose this guitar part and I'm going to be thinking major and minor 6 taken from the E Mixolydian mode. No, there's no way he was thinking in those terms. He's just playing a cool guitar part. He's got a great ear. He knows these kind of shapes and how to use them. So that's the important thing. Don't get too hung up on the theory. So onto the lick itself, and I'm going to break this down into two halves. Let's start with the first bit of the lick that goes like this. So we've got these two sixth shapes, the major sixth and the minor sixth shapes. We're starting up here at the 16th fret, and we've got a B and we've got a G sharp. So this is the 16th fret on the G string, 16th fret on the high E string. Then we're moving that shape down 2 frets. Then we're switching to the other 6th shape, and we've got a G sharp on the G string and an E on the high E string. And then we're moving that shape 2 frets lower. So those are the 4 finger shapes that we're dealing with. So I'm using a bit of hybrid picking to play these 6 shapes. I think that's often a good idea when you're playing 6. And I'm pretty sure this is how Cornel Dupree does it himself. And that means that I'm picking the notes on the G string using the pick. And then the notes on the high E string I'm playing using the middle finger of my picking hand. So it's pick and then finger. So let's talk about the way that Dupree is using these shapes. And really this is all about the rhythm. It's a great funky syncopated rhythm. And it's the kind of rhythm I think that is easier just to listen to and try and pick up by ear and feel than it is to actually count it out. I mean, I could count this one out for you in terms of 1 eander, 2 eander and all of that stuff, but to be honest, that actually gets more confusing. And if you see this kind of rhythm written down, it's quite difficult to read because we've got 16ths and 8ths and tied notes and all this kind of thing. So the way I think of it is it's just a rhythm which you feel. So it's da ba da ga da ba da ba da boo ba 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 da ba da 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 ba ba ba, like a drum pattern or something. And just thinking in those terms, that seems to make it a little bit easier. So we've got the first bit, da ba da ba da. So we're sliding into the 16th fret, and then we're moving down to the shape 2 frets lower, da ba da ba da. And then we just got pairs of notes, ba da ba da ba da, and then we're repeating that last pair of notes again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So just building it up like that, listening closely to the recording and just trying to soak up the feel of it. And we're kind of sliding between these shapes. I'm not really thinking about those slides particularly, they just kind of happen by themselves as you're moving between the shapes. So that's the first part of the lick. Interesting, I think, to relate all of this stuff to chord shapes. This is again what I talked about in the previous 6th video. So here I might be thinking about an E7 chord up here at the 12th fret, and then I've just got these little shapes hiding in and around this chord shapes. It makes it quite easy to access those ideas. So the second half of this lick is very similar, except we've moved over onto the next string set. So we're still using 6, but now those 6 are on the B string and on the D string. And the shapes we're using this time are the 14th fret on both of those strings, and then the 12th fret, then the 9th fret, and then we're switching to the other shape. We've got the 6th and 5th frets here, and then moving that shape 2 frets lower. So we've got, again, all of those notes, 6 taken from the E Mixolydian scale or mode. Rhythmically, this is very similar to the first part of the lick. So we're going da ba da ba da, and then pairs of notes, and then the last bit we're playing the 2 6ths at the same time, so pick and fingers together, and we're just sliding from the 3rd fret up to the 5th fret. So we have so that's the basic lick. Let me just try and put all of that together for you slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4. A bit faster. Main difficulty here is just the speed of it. It's played quite fast, so you need to be quite accurate, and you're moving from one end of the fretboard to the other. So just start slowly and then build up the speed whilst trying to maintain that accuracy. And got a crackly volume knob there. I have to do something about that. The other thing I was going to say is you can hear some slight variations on this riff during the course of the tune, and you can kind of, again, don't need to overthink that. You can just vary the way you articulate these shapes. I think the main one that I'm hearing is this. A little slide into that 9th fret shape, and then maybe varying the rhythm of these 6th down here. So feel free to play around with it, and you can certainly vary the rhythm and the articulation a little bit if you want to. Just a quick word on the gear that I'm using today, and controversially today I've just got a guitar which is plugged straight into an amplifier, so no effects pedals at all, and sometimes think that the best use of effects pedals is not to use them, and not every style of music, not every song requires effects pedals. Remember that, kids. Now the guitar that I'm using is a Fender Telecaster. This is a 52 reissue from sometime in the early 1990s. Amplifier is a Vox AC30. And I am in fact doing a little bit of further processing as I'm recording the guitar. So I'm miking the AC30 just with a Shure SM57. Then I'm going into a compressor. It's an outboard compressor called a distressor. And just a light bit of compression. It's not really squeezing the sound very much at all. It's just kind of warming it up more than anything else. And then once the recording is inside the computer, I'm just adding a touch of plate reverb. That's all for today. I will put the tab to this up on my Patreon page. Also probably put my backing track up there as well. It's just a 1-chord vamp in E, but if you fancy playing along with that, then do check out my Patreon page. Also, as I said, I am open to suggestions for future nice licks, so if you've got any thoughts on that, do let me know. Thanks very much for watching. I shall see you next time. Bye bye.